خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك مشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمر ننقص في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي لها إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويهك القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وظللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على كل أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات سورة المباركة الفاتحة
مرحوم آل محمد صلوات اللهم بار دیگر نعرہ صلوات اللہم صلی علی. سب سے پہلے میں تہ دل سے شکریہ ادا کروں گا غلام جعفر فیملی کا کہ انہوں نے اس ناچیز کو یہاں سمجھا کہ یہاں آ کے ذکر باب عبداللہ کر سکے، اور آپ تمام مومنین کا بھی شکریہ ادا کروں گا کہ آپ لوگ یہاں آئے. اور گزارش ہے کہ ٹو ریکویسٹ سورہ فاتحہ فار مرحوم Abdulhussein, Sheni Jaffer and all Marhumin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Marhum ala Muhammad salawat. Allah. چار مصرے پیش کر رہا ہوں. بار دیگر نعرے صلوات اللہم. ایسا لگتا ہے کہ ہو سورہ اخلاص کی ماں. ایسا لگتا ہے کہ ہو سورہ اخلاص کی ماں. ایسا لگتا ہے کہ وہ سورہ اخلاص کی ماں. ایسا لگتا ہے وفاؤں کے ہو کرتاس کی ماں. ایسا لگتا ہے وفاؤں کے ہو کرتاس کی ماں. بعد زہرا کہ جو ہے دیکھی ہو ہم سے بیبی. بعد زہرا کہ جو ہے دیکھی ہو ہم سے بیبی. حضرت عباس کی ماں. ایسا لگتا ہے کہ ہو سورہ اخلاص کی ماں. درود پڑھیں موضوع آل محمد پر. اچھا ایک کلام پیش کر رہا ہوں. آپ تمام مومنین سے گزارش ہے کہ میرے ساتھ آخری جو ردیف کہیں چلتے چلتے وہ آپ پلیز میرے ساتھ پڑھیے گا. پیش کر رہا ہوں میں بارد النار صلوات. اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا مفتیوں تم ذرا چلتے چلتے. ساتھ میں پڑھنا ہے آپ کو. اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا مفتیوں تم ذرا چلتے چلتے. شرمائے نہیں. اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا مفتیوں تم ذرا. اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا مفتیوں تم ذرا چلتے چلتے. روند ڈالیں گے فتوے تمہارے یہ جلوس ادا چلتے چلتے. روند ڈالیں گے فتوے تمہارے یہ جلوس ادا چلتے. آپ کی کیا کہنے ایک ہی آواز آ رہی ہے, پیچھے سے آواز نہیں آ رہی. روند ڈالیں گے فتوے تمہارے یہ جلوس ادا. کچھ قدم سے کچھ قدم بڑا شے کی جانب. کچھ قدم سے کی جانب. کچھ قدم بڑا شے کی جانب. کچھ قدم سے کی جانب. بخش دی چند لمحوں نے بخش دی چند لمحوں نے شہنے اور کسائی خطا چلتے چلتے. اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا مفتیوں تم ذرا چلتے آیا ہے. پیش کر رہا ہوں اچھے دیکھیے گا. لگ رہا ہے کہ میری لہب میں کوئی سورج طلوع ہو رہا ہے. لگ رہا ہے کہ میری لہب میں کوئی سورج طلوع ہو رہا ہے. دوستوں نے کفن میں رکھی تھی دوستوں نے کفن میں رکھی تھی تھوڑی خاکے دوستوں نے کفن میں رکھی تھی تھوڑی خاکے شفا چلتے چلتے. تو کو زنجیر یہ کہہ رہے تھے اے یزید اب تیری تباہی. تو کو زنجیر یہ کہہ رہے تھے اے یزید اب تیری تباہی. جس کو بیمار سمجھا تو تو نے شام تک آ گیا چلتے چلتے شام تک آ گیا، چلتے چل اپنی آنکھوں سے ہی دیکھ لینا، مفتیوں تم کیا کہیں گے، مفتیوں تم، پیچھے سے آواز نہیں آ رہی، مفتیوں تم روند ڈالیں گے فتوے تمہارے، یہ جلوس درود پڑھیں محمد وآل محمد پر اللہ۔ کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہے سو، کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہے سو، شکستہ ہے پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پپہرا مصائب کا سہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہے سو، شکستہ پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا، در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعدہ اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے، در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعدہ اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے، تماچے نہ مارو مسلمان جاؤ، علی کو بلاؤ اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پپہرا مصائب کا سہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، بیاں کس سے جا کے کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا، بیاں کی کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا، کوئی جا کے بابا، کوئی جا کے بابا سے کہہ دو یہ جا کے کہ لے جاؤ آ کے، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پپہرا مصائب کا سہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، شہ کربلا میں، شہ کربلا میں کہاں روکے ماں سے یہ مظلوم بیٹے نے، مظلوم ماں سے، شہ کربلا میں کہاں روکے ماں سے یہ مظلوم بیٹے نے، مظلوم ماں سے، اکیلا ہوں میں بھی، اکیلا ہوں میں بھی، اکیلی ہے زینا، اکیلے ہے بابا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پپہرا مصائب کا سہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اے لخت جگر
حسن ابن حیدر یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گئے لگتے جگر حسن ابن حیدر یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گئے تم آ جانا پہلو میں سو جانا ماں کے بقیے میں یہاں پر اکیلی ہے زہرا رونے کا پہرا مصائب کا سہرا اکیلی ہے زہرا سر مرگ سر مرگ زہرا کا نوحہ کب آؤ گے مہدی کب آؤ گے بیٹا خدا کے لیے اب خدا کے لیے اب یہ پردہ ہٹا دو چلے آؤ آؤ اکیلی ہے زہرا رونے پپغیرا مصائب کا سگرا اکیلی ہے زہرا کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہے سو شکستہ ہے پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا برائے تاجل ظہور امام زمان بسلائے بلند صلوات اللہ
Before we welcome our speaker, Brother Shabir Kirmani, let us all recite 5 times, I am Mujibu, especially for the safety of all those in conflict areas, all those who are sick and near and far, especially Brother Akbar Rizvi, Brother Azabalu, and all others, and for all those who need prayers. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سورة المباركة الفاتحة حبيب خدا ختم الأنبياء محمد وآل محمد صلوات
Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the following Marhameen, as well as your Marhameen and all Mu'mineen Marhameen. Marhum Abdulhussein, Shani Jaffer, and all Marhameen of the Jaffer family. Marhameen of the Habib, all Marhameen of the Habib family. Ghulam Ali Dewji, Safdar Jaffer, Shabir Nathani, Sajjad Jaffer, Mahmoud Datu, Raza Huda, Askar Farhad Hassan Ali, Marhumeen of the Ganji family, and Kul Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. I've also been informed that there's a brother in the hospital, Brother Akbar Rizvi. Inshallah, please do keep him in your prayers as well, inshallah. And for all those who've asked us for du'as, please keep them in your du'as as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters here now in town or wherever you may be hearing my voice across the globe, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what are parents? When it comes to us commemorating the esteemed gathering that we are here for, one being, of course, the commemoration of Bibi Ummul Baneen, but at the same time we are commemorating a father and a member of our community, one thing that I thought may be pertinent to discuss is the concept of parents, and how interesting and how timely it is in our era, in our time, that this topic may need to be discussed not only within our community, not only within the Shia community, not only within the broader Muslim community, not only within the faith community, but perhaps even within the societal community at large. That is how important the family structure is, how important parents are, how important the mother is, how important the father are, and important in terms of not just words or lip service. That is to understand the essence of what makes us as humans humans. Therefore, tonight, in the brief moments that I have with you in commemorating the matters that we are commemorating in light of the family of the Ahlul Bayt and understanding how they taught to be parents, how they taught to be mothers, how they taught to be fathers, how they taught to be wonderful human beings, I want to not only give you that angle, I also want us to look at how can I talk to others about this importance? A member, a friend of mine who I meet down the street, someone who's at work, someone who may be in any corner of life, that we have this commonality as human beings that reverence for parents is something that is vital. And within that context and that framework, I want to discuss with you what is the view of different philosophers throughout times on parents, number one. Number two, what is the relationship and the importance of this as respect to other faiths and other religions? What does Islam say about this, and why is that vital now more than ever? The fourth element of this that I want to look at with you is the immense dividends that God and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, not only in the hereafter, in this world, for that service that we call service, but perhaps should be known by another name. And of course, again, finally, in that, the sorrow and the thing that soothes our sorrows and every difficulty is the zikr and the remembrance of the Ahlul Bayt. This elixir that they've given us to be able to channel and go through those difficult moments by sacrificing their lives and allowing us to remember it. That is inshallah what we'll commemorate tonight, inshallah. Wherever you are here or across the globe, send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, the second chapter of the Quran is called Surah Baqarah, as you and I are aware. And this chapter is known as the cow. In the context of understanding this, it's very important to understand that a cow in our word and in that context of when it was revealed is not the same thing. If you go to the etymology of the word, you'll find that, you talk about capital investment, capital in different forms, how much money you're putting up. Well, actually that capital, even till this day, they often say, how many heads of cattle are you buying in the agricultural industry? And the root word of capital actually comes from that. When you understand this, you understand that that cow at that junction is not just a cow. It's a form of wealth. It's a form of economics. It's a form of how does someone sustain themselves and their family in that societal context, number one. So now there's a moment in time that the Quran tells us that there's a situation where Banu Israel is having a conversation with Musa. And in the situation between Bani Israel and Musa, there comes a junction where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Musa, Kalimullah, says, look, Musa, tell Bani Israel that they need to do something if they want this situation solved. What's the matter? Here's the breakdown. The Quran is telling us that there was a murder in the historical realm, that the Quran documented, and it was unknown who was the killer. So what happened? Two brothers, they come forward, and eventually they propose to a young lady, all from the Quran. And eventually, well, the context is from narrations, but the Quran gives us the story. And so what happens is, they vie for a bride. And eventually one is accepted, one is not accepted. And eventually when one is accepted, the other one becomes envious as to why was I not accepted and the other person was accepted. This envy is something from Adam till the time of Insan. From Habil and Qabil, it's something that's destroyed societies. Not only that, it still runs our world. You ask Buffett, he'll tell you, it's not jealousy, it's envy that runs the world. You don't have a problem, we don't have a problem with, we have a problem with different things. We think it's about making money for ourselves. No, oftentimes, we just can't see other people thrive. We can't see other people. In Islam, this is a spiritual disease. We can't see other people do well. And so that's what happened at that junction. So he decided that I'm going to murder this person. And so he did. And at that junction, the next day, the people in the town of Bani Israel were like, what's going on? Who committed this crime? Who committed this atrocity? How did this happen? And so they said, Musa, we need your help. So Musa goes to Allah, and Allah says to Allah, Ya Allah, this is the matter. They want a solution, a resolution, so that they can solve this matter. They don't know who the murderer is. They don't know who committed the crime. They need to figure it out. And so they need your help. But okay. Musa goes to talk, Kalimullah, he has the ability to speak to God. He goes to the mount, he speaks to God. Same way he brought the 10 Commandments, he speaks to God, and God says, look, the people of Bani Israel, if they want a solution to this, they have to do something. They have to make a sacrifice. Get a cow, sacrifice the cow, and by virtue of that sacrifice, then you'll find some solution. Now at that junction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never, this is lam al-ta'qidi, lan tanalu al-birra, means it will never happen. Musa said, Ya Allah, I want to see you. Allah responds to him, lan tarani, won't happen, never gonna happen, impossibility. Similarly, Allah says, you will never attain righteousness until you give away from that which you love. Until you give away from that which you love. So you can inverse this and you'll get the result. So now, when this junction happens, at this moment, Musa says, Ya Allah, I'm done, I'll let them know. And so he makes his way there. When he makes his way there, eventually what happens? Bani Israel, they had a lot of questions. They didn't take things easily. And so they're okay, what kind of cow, Musa? Big cow, small cow, red cow, blue cow, what color? What color, what size, what dynamics? Tell me everything. And so Musa says, very well. He goes back to God, goes to Allah, Ya Allah, they're asking what kind of cow? Allah says, this type of cow, for example, female, for example. Then they went back, He said, okay, female, what, tell us more, what's the color, for example? Allah says, okay, fine. Yellowish hue. You may have heard of red heifers, for example, right? In that context. So and it shouldn't have been mounted or anything like that. So eventually, this back and forth continues. Eventually, what happens is that they ask so many questions, not with perhaps the intent that they're actually trying to figure out, but the intent that perhaps they're trying to get out of this somehow. That's what Mufassirin say. So anyways, eventually, all the particulars were there. Female, should have never been mounted, should have never has the yellow color, and all of these things. So eventually they found that this was getting more specific and said, how do we get this? And so eventually what happens is a moment comes forward and they find and they track down one cow that meets all the criteria. And when they find this one cow, it belongs to this one young man who has his mother with him. And that's where Surah Baqarah gets its name, but keep that on ice for a moment, we'll come back to it. So this is the first junction, number one. Number two, when it comes to this understanding of parents in the context of world religions, before we even get to Islam, I want us to think about this. In the realm of the philosophers, the different faiths, and then Islam, what has been said on this? Because someone may say, hey, I'm not a Muslim. Someone may say, hey, I'm not a person of faith. What is the basis of this? The basis is the following. Second point. If you come to philosophers throughout time, before we even get to religion, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and the likes, Plato said in his Republic, which is considered the foundation of politics and economics in the Western world and the modern world, he said, a man must fulfill his first, largest, and greatest debt in life. You know, in life, you go to college, you have debt sometimes, you have to repay that. You buy a car, you have loan repayments, you have a house, you have to pay a mortgage against your life. This whole idea is there, right? So what's the first debt that man needs to repay? Plato says, Aflatun, Plato says the first debt that a man needs to repay is the debt to a parent. First. For without them, you're not there, number one. So then they asked Plato, how do you repay? He said in three ways. Number one, you repay them with your body. How in the body? They sometimes may get weaker, you help them physically. Maybe if that's groceries, whatever you do to help them, you physically help them with that. He said, what else? He said, help them with your words. Kindness, affection, loving, right? You know what Islam says? Islam says to look at your parents with affection is a form of worship, ibadah. What? To smile at them. Third element, he says, with your spirit, you must serve your parents. So how do you repay your parents with the spirit? How do you repay them with spirit? And perhaps we know that now more than ever. It's, when they call you, you pick up. When they need a minute of your time, you give them a minute of your time. We're strapped for that in our world today. You know what we are? We're slaves. We're economic slaves. These aren't my words. These are the words of philosophers in the 21st century. Slavery hasn't ended. We don't have time for our parents. You know the average American spends 4 hours with their grandparents, grandkids and grandparents in the whole year? I'm saying this because the family structure is vital. We need to understand the position of mothers. We need to understand the position of fathers. We need to understand the position of grandparents. Now, I'm all for healthy boundaries, for sure. No problem. But within that context, the respect and the understanding is vital. Now to this junction. Aristotle said a man must starve himself before his parents starve. Meaning that if you're starving, you need to check yourself that are your parents, that if you have food for yourself, and your parents, have you checked on them that they have food for themselves? Further than this, if you go to different ideas in Confucianism, there's a concept that for 3 years, China, the Eastern society, China, Korea, Japan, and places where Confucianism reigns, there's a concept of filial piety. For 3 years after the death of your parents, you're in mourning. You're in a state of sorrow for 3 years. I say this because every civilization realized that without understanding the honor and the prestige of the position of parents, our humanity ceases to function. Why? Charles Darwin was about to drain his entire theory of evolution in the river because he could not explain one thing. And that is the word altruism. He could not understand, in a world of survival of the fittest, why is it that certain entities, and he said in particular parents, for example, why did they do things without expectation of return? And someone may need to have told Darwin that is where Allah put his love in the heart of the parent. And there's no measure for that. There's no measure. And that's the key element that our society may have forgotten. And we need to revive that. So that's the second element. Not only that, go to other religions of the world. We're told there's a moment in time in Hindu mythology. I'm saying this because we have colleagues, we have friends, we have people who we go to doctor's offices, we have colleagues and people who are from all sorts of backgrounds. How do we explain to them? Well, here you go. Ganesha. In Hindu mythology, there's different based on which regions. In the southern regions, there's the concept of Ganesha. Ganesha is a god, one of the gods of the Hindus. And in that concept, Ganesha has a dialogue and a discussion with his sibling. The sibling is very strong, massive, seems to have strength. And Ganesha just seems to be not as physically strong. And so at that junction, they have a competition. Now, all of these are meant to tell a story. They're meant to tell us something valuable at the end, a message that we can take home. And so they have a competition. They say, who can go around the earth faster? Me or you? So Ganesha and the big athletic one says, I can go. He says, no, I can. Okay. They get ready. He said, ready, set, go. The big one goes and he goes around earth once, twice, 3 times. Eventually, he comes back to earth. And when he comes back to earth, he finds Ganesha standing there in the same spot with his parents next to him. And the big one says, I won. I won. He said, I went around the world 3 times. You didn't even budge. You didn't move. He said, no, I won. Ganesha says, I won. He said, how? He said, look, you went around the world once, twice, 3 times. Yeah, sure, you did it. He said, but while you did it, while you went around the world 3 times, while you went around the world 3 times, I went around my parents 3 times. So you went around the world, I went around my world. What matters more? Understanding that dynamic of just a word shifting and a perspective shifting changes everything. And that's sometimes all that matters. You find that understanding how you look at things and how you observe things makes all the difference. 2 people enter into a religious gathering, one person removes his hat, one puts a hat on. Both are signs of respect. Which one's right? Further than this, come to Abrahamic faiths, the Bible, the Old Testament, come to Judaism, Christianity. God sends Moses to the mount, and Moses comes back with the 10 commandments. And amongst the 10 commandments, he comes back with one of the commandments being, honor thy parents. Right? True? Honor thy parents, one of the 10 commandments. So in Islamic, in writings and other writings, we find that eventually when this came, Banu Israel, they said to Musa, Musa, we need a clarification, please. So what do you need? He said, look, you said that honor thy parents, but where we live, in our environment, the ruler is Pharaoh. Pharaoh rules. Pharaoh is the ruler. What if Pharaoh says something that contradicts our parents? What do? We need clarification. So Musa goes back to the mount. Moses goes back to the mount. When he goes back to the mount, he says, Ya Allah, Banu Israel needs clarification. This is the matter. Pharaoh goes to the parents. And then God doubled down. And he says, honor thy parents, without whom thou would not exist. You wouldn't exist without them. What are you talking about, Pharaoh? So this is something that is common within it. Even in fact, if you go to Abraham Lincoln, 15th President of the United States, Gettysburg may not be that far from here, I imagine. What does he say? He says that I always remembered my mother's prayers. I always remembered my mother's prayers. They clung on to me wherever I went. So this notion of attributing your success to your parents and their prayers is not something that is unique to us. It's something that is part and parcel of the human existence. Well, we've somehow lost it. Somehow we've forgotten it. Somehow we've ventured off the path. So now, with respect to this, as we commemorate these immense personalities, it's important for us to fathom this. So what happened? The concept of mothers, the concept of fathers, they transcend words. So what does God say in Islam, coming to the third element? Allah says, it's the ayah that I recited at the beginning, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Allah says that I ordain and I command unto you that you do not worship anyone except me. God saying this. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And do ihsan to your parents. I can't translate ihsan yet, because typically people translate do good. It's not right. It's very shallow. You know, I said I'm seeing some friends from New York here. I mentioned this in New York. So if you go to Columbia University, and you study languages, Columbia is known for linguistics, amongst other things. Business, and Buffett taught there, many other people taught there. But there's something when you look at languages, it's called, when you listen to, for example, Ghambayan or Marsiyas that you were saying or listening to very beautifully, there's something in languages called emotional resonance. Some are higher than others in emotional resonance. For example, German and English are part of Germanic languages. They're very straight to the point, cut to the chase. French, within the Latin languages, is actually more poetic or romantic, it's considered. And when I say that because when we look at the context of this idea, if you read a book that's been written by Albert Camus, in that book, he says, Maman et Maître. It's a book in existential philosophy. It's in French. It's been translated. Sartre wrote this, The Stranger. And in that line, there's a huge debate in the history of philosophy and language about the word maman versus mom. And many French writers have said the word mom and maman are not equal. There's a world of a difference. Maman has much more warmth, affection, care versus mom. It's not the same. I'm saying that because sometimes we translate words from the Quran in such a light way that we think we're getting the whole message across, when in reality, we're missing the whole thing, oftentimes. So now, Allah says, do ihsan to them. Do ihsan to your parents. And the Mufassirin saying, why did Allah say this in the same line? Worship me and do ihsan to your parents. Why? Why? He could have separated these out. He could have delineated this. He could have put this in two different sentences, in two different verses, in two different ayat. By the way, another side point. In Islam, we don't call them verses. We've inherited this perhaps from other faiths. What we call a verse is an ayah. Ayah literally means sign. Each of them is a sign of God. And so sometimes when we look or glance over these, we miss the essence of what God's saying. Each one of these is a sign. The same way the sun, the star, the moons are signs. So now, come back to me and stay with me here, please. And I'll try to keep it succinct too. At this junction, when this happens, and this idea that Allah is saying that I did not allow you to worship anyone except me, but if I were to, it seems it would have been your parents. And the basis of this being that one manifestation of the mercy of God on earth is known through the affection of parents, is known through the love of parents, the selflessness of parents. That same thing that Darwin was willing to drain his entire thesis into the river because he couldn't explain it. How is it possible that this happened? Now, at this junction, when this happens, eventually, when we talk about parents, it's important for us to reconcile these things. And, you know, this is the strangeness of life. That is, we sometimes don't value our parents when they're around. We understand their value after they leave. That's the nature of human beings. We understand the value of anything when we lose it. While it's with us, it goes. Or we use it, or we have it in a way that it just completely, we glance over it. Where Allah is saying, no, don't take that for granted. Realize that value. We're told in Tafsir, there's a moment in time where there's a man, during the time of Banu Israel, during the time of Nabi Musa, as you know, Allah sent many prophets to these people. And there's a junction in time, in a moment in time, where there is a father and a son. And this father and this son, they're merchants, they're businessmen. And eventually, in the middle of the night, a man comes, and he comes to buy some grain. Now, in grain, as you know, if you know the story of Yusuf, they kept these in silos. They still do this till this day. And they had 7 good years, 7 bad years. And they kept a harvest of grain in silos. And so they had access to a silo, which they would sell grain to people. So a merchant comes, a man comes wanting to purchase and buy grain at night. And so at that junction, the day had passed, the father was sleeping on the ground. And the son was there, he was awake when the knock came at the door. And when the knock came at the door, the son says, how can I help you? He says, you know, salam or shalom, or what they have said. And they greet each other. He said, I need to buy a large amount of grain. He said, but I need right now. Okay. How much do you need? He said, I need X amount. Ton. He said, okay. And done. I got it for you. He said, okay. This amount? He said, nobody else has this amount. You have it? I have it. Okay. He said, where is it? It's in the silo. Okay, very good. He said, okay, where's the keys? The keys are there, but you have the money? He said, yes, I have the money. I'll make the arrangements right now. So he says, done, deal. So money is here, they'll get the grain. And so when he enters back, the young man, the son, he enters back into the home, and he realizes he's looking for the keys for the silo where the grain is kept. He's not finding it. When he's not finding it, eventually what happens? He realizes that the key, he sees the edge of the key under the pillow of his father, who's sleeping. And now this young man has a dilemma. He says, should I disturb my father and wake him up to do this business deal and finish it? Or shall I not? This isn't something light. For context, Nabi Yusuf goes through all those challenges. And he's a very high-level prophet. He goes through being thrown into the well and being taken through challenge after challenge, but eventually he becomes the Aziz of Misr and he becomes the finance minister of Egypt, and there's a junction that something happens, and I want to take you to that moment. The Quran says Yusuf's story is Ahsan al-Qasas, the most beautiful of stories. And so eventually what happens is there's a moment that Yusuf sees the family coming, his father and his siblings, the same ones, the siblings who are treacherous to him in his youth, he sees them coming from a distance. Now, here's the dialogue between Yusuf internally and the angel. What happens at that junction is he gets up, and at that notion, this is the dynamic. Yusuf is the finance minister in the eyes of the people. He knows the people who are coming there are his father and siblings. So he has a tremendous respect for his father, Yaqub, right? Yaqub is Israel, right? Banu Israel comes from the family of Jacob, right? Yaqub. So he sees his father. At a moment he hesitates. And he thinks not for the reason of his father. He doesn't hesitate because of his father. He has tremendous respect and love and admiration for his father. But he hesitates because of the people. And he thinks to himself, while he's on his horse, proceeding towards his father, and he stops for a moment. And when he stops for a moment, he thinks to himself, should I move forward to go greet him? Or should I stop and let him come my way? Because the people won't understand. The people think, who's this finance minister who's the second in charge in society and runs all the economics of the city and the town, and he's going towards some normal individual citizen? As soon as he thought this, narrations say, a light emanated from the hands of Joseph. And Yusuf saw this. And he looks at it and he says, and the angel, Jibreel, descends, he says, what's the meaning of this? What just happened? And he said, Yusuf, it was a test. It was a test. The same way, different levels, tests may elevate us, they may not. He didn't make a mistake, but you'll see in a moment. He said, yes, this light that left your hand, that is the nur of Nabuwwat. That is the nur in the light of prophethood. It's left your hand. Meaning it's left your lineage. It's not going to continue in your line. I said, why? He said, that moment that you just had internally within yourself of hesitation to respect your father was enough to remove the light of prophethood from your lineage. God didn't like that for a moment. Yes, the people would not understand, but to heck with the people in the eyes of God. Because those parents are not your parents. They are the manifestation of God's mercy on earth through them to you. It's a very different framework. We don't realize being a mother is a spiritual act of worship in Islam. Being a father is a spiritual act of worship in Islam. Getting married is a spiritual act of worship in Islam. Being a righteous person is a spiritual act. We have delineated this and compartmentalized this in society. Now, having said all of this and bringing all the pieces of the puzzle together, this young man, coming back to the young man who's trying to get that key that's under the pillow of his father, what should I do? He says, I'm not going to wake him up. He goes back and he says, look, deal is good. It's on paper. We can sign the documents, but I can't give you the grain right now. Not happening. I said, what? The main reason I came at this hour is because I need it now. And I'm giving you a huge amount, huge supply. I need it done. Let's get it done. He said, can't do it, sorry. He said, why? He said, the key's there, but my dad's sleeping. Honest guy. My dad's sleeping and the key's under his pillow. I can't wake him up. I said, really? Are you serious? Are you serious? He It's dead serious. I said, sorry. I said, okay. I said, think about it. It's a big deal. Yeah, I thought about it. Done. It's okay. So he goes this way, son goes back in, he rests. It's the night, he rests. The next day, the father wakes up. He says, was there any business while I was sleeping? Did we make any money? Did we make any sales? Did we make any revenue? Did anything happen? He said, somebody came, but nothing came of it. He said, why? He said, well, he had really extenuating demands. He said, okay, what kind of demands did he have? Well, how much did he want to buy? He wanted to buy a ton. He said, oh, well, that's a lot. He said, okay. He said, where? From the silo. He said, we have it in store. Okay, very good. What else? He wanted it right there and then. So why didn't you give it to him? So now the son starts saying this, that, and the other, and he starts making some types of excuses. So he doesn't want to tell his dad. This is another aspect of adab. You know, sometimes we do someone a favor and we shove it in their face. Huh? Or what we think is a favor, right? Eventually, the father was smart too, of course. And he said, what was the real reason? He said, Dad, the real reason is you were sleeping and I couldn't wake you up. And so the father gets upset. He said, what? Just where you should have woke me up. Now remember, Allah, when He says, Hal jaza'ul ihsani illa al-ihsan, we sometimes say it's a favor. Allah doesn't hold anything. And no one can do a favor to God. Allah will say, who's going to give me a loan in the Quran? And He does. And Allah may say, who may do a favor to Allah? But Allah doesn't keep it for very long. So eventually what happened was, at that junction, this multi-million-dollar deal or billion-dollar deal in their terms at that time, he forsake it out of respect and integrity and remembering the right of his father. What happened? Eventually, this same son, after the father has passed away, he has only now he is taking care of his mother. And when he is taking care of his mother, they have one thing. They've gone through all these difficulties. Now they're left with only one property that they have left. And that happens to be a cow. And that happens to be a cow that is a female. And that happens to be a cow that is female, that is yellow in color. And that happens to be a cow that is yellow in color, that's female, that has not been mounted before. And at that same junction, many years on, the people of Banu Israel come and knock at that door. And they say, we found out that you're the only people in town that have a cow that meets the criteria that we're looking for. What do you want for it? So the son, he had admiration for his father and for his mother. He said, my mother, the people have come and they say they want to buy our cow. It's our property, it's our capital, it's everything we got. Tell them 200 dinar, 200 dirham, 200 coins. They went back, and so the son says, my mom says, this is the price we decided, 200 sovereigns, 200 coins. He said, no way, are you serious? No way. Exorbitant, ridiculous, no way. But then eventually, they said, we have to solve this murder, we have to solve this dynamic, we have to solve the problem here. What do we do? So they talked amongst themselves and said, okay, fine, we'll do it. 200, we'll make it happen. They were stubbornly, that's also a challenge sometimes, that when you have to give, that's also a spiritual disease in Islam. Sometimes getting it out, it's very difficult. Anyways, so they said, okay, young man, deal, 200 coins will buy it, 200 dinars will buy it. He said, yeah, that was the old price. So what do you mean? He said, if you bought that on the spot, that was the 200 price. I'm not going to sell it for you 200. I talked to my mom about that. They were business people too. Were they Gujarati? I don't know. But they were business people. Having said that, at that junction, what happened was, they said, now price is 300. They said, have you lost your mind? We weren't going to pay 200. You don't want us to pay 300? Continued. They said, okay, fine, 300. 300. Said, nope, old deal, not doing that anymore. 400. This continued up until the point it got to 1,000. They said, look, if we start to deliberate and discuss this, it's going to be 1 million soon. Let's just take the next offer that they give. And they got it. Eventually, finally, when they became so stubborn that they were trying to negotiate, they became penny wise, pound foolish. The mother now said, my son, tell them, the price that we will sell this for to them is that when they sacrifice this cow, they take the flesh of the cow and they fill it with jewels. In the skin, all of that needs to be weighed and given to us as gold, as jewelry. They said, we were negotiating at 200, we should have taken the deal. Eventually, they said, very well. So they bought it and they purchased it. What Mufassirin and commentators say is that act, that one act that son had done for his father many years ago became the cause of them becoming the wealthiest people in town by virtue of what the Quran needed in terms of what that cow was. It was the only one that they had. And that meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you do something good, He's not going to hold for long. You'll get here and you'll get there. And that's the beauty of these dynamics. You know what the biggest regret now, and I'm bringing all this to a conclusion, you know what some of the biggest regrets are in life? When am I going to stop and I'm going to spend time with my parents, my loved ones? That's the strange dichotomy of life. We spend our whole life working for the ones we love. It's a beautiful thing. In Islam, it's also something that's highly recommended, but at the same time, we sometimes don't spend time with the people that matter the most until we don't realize their value, and we realize their value when they're gone. And Islam says, no, stop, pause. That's why we have Thursday nights. That's why we have Friday Jum'ah. That's why we have these pausing moments in our week to just stop and think, what gift do I have? They asked the sixth Imam, Ibn Rasulullah, I have huge problems. I have huge difficulties going on in my life. Can you pray for me? He said, are your parents alive? He said, yes. He said, go to them, go ask them to pray for you. Why are you asking me? An Imam saying that. The concept is sometimes we have a golden ticket in our own homes, in our own vicinity, in our own neighborhoods, and we don't realize it. And so now bringing all of these points together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when it comes to parents, that is something that He considers as part of duty to Him. So when we serve our parents, it's not serving them directly, it's serving God indirectly. Meaning, we're serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah ordained that. He said, you want to know my mercy? You want to know my love, my compassion? Having said that, that's the dynamic that brings this. As I've been told by several here, when we come to these personalities, whether, for example, Bibi Ummul Baneen, who we must commemorate tonight, you find that she sacrificed everything. Everything. Her position, her status, her children. Ummul Baneen, the mother of sons, sacrificed them all. And you find that in the Quran, many people, and in Islam, people ask many times, why aren't mothers prophets? Why aren't women prophets? And two responses that have come forward. One from Ayatul Jawad Amali, where He says, Allah made them mothers, and that's equivalent, number one. And number two, if you look deeper in the Quran, you'll find that Allah did not make mothers or women prophets, but He did make women the saviors of prophets, the protectors of prophets. Musa is being affected by infanticide. Pharaoh is killing young men or newborn boys in alternative years. There's a mother who has this child in her arms, in her hands. And Allah says in the Quran, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَىٰ أَنْ أَرْضَعِهِ. We ordered and we ordained the mother of Musa to put the child in the river. And on the other side, there was another mother, an adopting mother, Asya, who was waiting for that child. And she picked the child up. Maryam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't make her prophet, but she's the one who protected, nourished, and brought this child, Jesus, Isa ibn Maryam, into this world, which is captured in Surah Maryam of the Quran so beautifully. So now, having said that, Allah says that my mercy is manifest there. Now, having said this, and it being the majlis of Isal Sawab for some as well, and I think learning lessons from the lives of people is very important. Allah does not hide things. For example, in the middle of a barren desert, there was no witness. There was no eyewitness. There was no BBC, CNN, alhamdulillah there wasn't. There's a mother who's running between two hills. And she's trying to get water for her son. In the middle of a barren desert, there was no one to witness that. The father has gone based on a test of God in another domain. He's gone away. So mother is Hajar. And the mounts and the hills are between Safa and Marwa. Allah said, I will make it that till the end of time, it is incumbent upon believers who are able to go, they must run between Safa and Marwa. In remembrance of a mother's sincerity, a mother's recognition. So if you do something for God, there's no need to worry. He will handle your debt. He will take care of the balance. Marhum Jaffer, many of you know him much better. From one thing that I've been told, from here to Florida and from here to New York, no, but I didn't ask anyone, people told me straight away, is after he died, and correct me if I'm wrong, after he died, people understood how much he had done for others. Because he had a principle that he didn't tell people while he was there. You know, they used to say a saying, I don't know if you've ever heard this, Neki kar darya mein dal. Now it's Neki kar media pe dal. Right? Or you do something, you put it on social media. And the concept was, do you understand that that's another human being on that side? That those tables, that's the essence of humanity. If you understand this, you understand what's going on right now in Palestine, in Syria, that could be us. We just happen to win, not my words, Buffett says, the ovarian lottery. We happen to be living in this part of the world. We happen to be here. Ask those people who had to leave, for example, Uganda in a moment's notice. Ask those people when the revolution happened in East Africa who had to upend their lives in a moment. Ask those people who've had everything taken away from them in a moment. We live on artificial comfort. We live on artificial stability. So would we want someone putting a camera in our face when we're doing something, when we're the recipient of khairat, of charity? You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want someone in their lowest moment putting a camera in your face or saying, look, I know that's not why necessarily people do it, but the point that I'm getting at here is the Imam shows us, the 8th Imam. You know, the 8th Imam was the heir apparent where he was forced to do it. And he used his political position to help people. So a man comes to the Imam, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. He said, I'm a Shia, I'm a believer and a follower of yours, and I'm in need. I need money, I need wealth. So the Imam, who was the heir apparent, he went and he got wealth. When he got wealth, he came back. When he came back, the way the tradition describes how the Imam gave the wealth is amazing. The Imam put a curtain, and behind the curtain, he said, he put his hand behind the curtain, and he gave the other person. And after he left, they asked Imam Rada, the companions who were there, they said, Imam Rada, why did you do what you did? He said, what do you mean? He said, the person came, you saw him, you said, Salamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. And he asked you for something. You went and got it. But when you came back, you put a curtain, and behind the curtain you gave him, and you didn't look at him. Ibn Rasulullah, you already knew who he was. You already knew his identity. He already met you. Yeah. This is Ahlul Bayt. He said, yes, I knew who he was, and I saw him, and I know his identity. So then why did you do what you do? He says, the Imam says, he already put his integrity and his name and his being on the line by coming to me and telling me he was in need. And he shamed himself. He said, I didn't wish him to feel a second shame by my glance towards his face when I gave him. You know the adab in Islam of giving, and that's something we ought to learn. I must tell myself first and foremost. You know, in Islam, you're never supposed to give someone like this. You're supposed to give like this. They're taking from the hand of God. We are just custodians of God's work on earth. For one moment, we should not think that we have any superiority. Times shift. Didn't the recession of 2007, 2009 teach you anything? People lost wealth in a moment. If you go back further in history, you go into 1930, people were jumping out of buildings in New York City in a moment when they lost their money and their wealth. Things come and go. What we do for others matters. Those are the most important things. Having said that, I'm drawing to a conclusion. Baneen, she teaches us, she inspires us, and I tell this wherever I go. If you're ever in a bind, if you're ever in a difficult spot, if you're ever in a moment where you have nothing left, just do one thing. Recite a Fatiha, the way we recite a Fatiha for our loved ones, and give the sawab to Baneen, the mother of Abul Fadl Abbas. Why? Allah knows. To be honest, it may be a secret, but the dimensions of her, and by the way, I found this out when I went to London. I spoke to scholars and young people who are in their 30s, 20s. You know, typically when it comes to these amal and these du'as and all of these things, you don't get the younger generation to it. You don't get our elders, our mothers, our fathers, our aunts, our uncles. They're the ones who are very adamant about this many times. But young people, yeah, since I had my real estate property deal locked up, there was no solution. This person wasn't he wasn't always the most practicing necessarily. There are people who are saying that, you know, kids, I can't tell you. How it works, I don't know. Even in medicine today, there are things we don't know how they work, but they work. Similarly, in the domain of this, we don't know how it works necessarily. One day we may find out. But perhaps one aspect of Ummul Baneen is that the one who's known as the mother of sons, Ummul Baneen, perhaps she gave everything to Islam, to the point that there was no one to recite a Fatiha for her. She had no son, they had given everything. But you would think that a mother like that, never forget Ummul Baneen. Never forget the mothers of Karbala. Never forget the mothers who made it happen. Never forget the fathers. You know, in our world, we sometimes forget this. Just because someone is in favor of women's rights doesn't mean they have to be against men's rights, right? And what I mean by that is, our men are in a lot of pressure. I met a doctor, I won't say where, she was older and she was not from the Muslim community, she was from the Hispanic community actually. And she said that, you know, you have a challenge in your community. I said, what community? She said the Indian subcontinent community. I said, what do you mean? She said that I was in med school, and when I was in med school, you know, some of the junior students would come to me as I was a senior. The first year, second year, third year students would come to me who were, for example, from the Indo-Pak subcontinent. And they would tell me about their cultural dynamics, and they would say that, you know, what she said, she understood was, she's telling me this, what she understood was, she said any other guy, any other male, any other man in American society who's having to deal with the pressure of what a brown man is facing in America would crack. I said, what do you mean? She said, the young brown man today, the father, the man, he has to make his family happy, his parents happy, his children happy, his spouse happy, his uncles happy, everybody happy. But nobody asks them, are they happy? And the reality of the matter is we're facing this full on, and this is a big challenge. The same way we need to consider the right, until and unless we don't go back to the family structure and understand that a mother is valuable in doing a spiritual endeavor, and the father is also doing a spiritual endeavor, we won't heal our families. I'm saying this in a heartbroken environment. I'm hearing stories where people are doing everything right, and they're still splitting up. How do you solve that? It's not going to happen until we understand the values and the positions of what a family is in the spiritual life and what Islam tells us. Having said that and bringing all this together, it would be unjust and perhaps unfair to not discuss Abul Fadl Abbas by virtue of understanding his mother, Ummul Baneen. You know what's amazing about parents? The only relationship that you'll find on this planet that would want their children to outpace them and excel them. Parents, that's it. Parents are the only relationship on the planet, perhaps, where the parents want their children to do better than them. You don't find this anywhere else. We live in a world of competition. We live in a world where siblings are sometimes at competitions. Cousins are at competitions. Everyone's at competition. The keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with the Patels, right? They got a nicer car, I got a nicer car. They got this, I got this. You're constantly, parents just want you to do better than them. Who does that? And one of the ways is sometimes they sacrifice everything in their own life for their children. So what happens? Ummul Baneen, one way we understand her is by her son Abbas. Who's Abbas? Abbas, the narrations say that Abbas's position on the Day of Judgment will be such that the prophets will do ghibta. Ghibta is a sort of a positive envy. You know, like you say that in dua, like, Ya Allah, the way that if you want some dua that someone else has and you want it for yourself, the way to do it in Islam is you pray that Allah gives them more and Allah gives you some as well. And so the prophets will say, Ya Allah, we wish, Rush, for example, we wish we had that maqam of Abbas. What it is, you know, it's beyond words. And Abbas exemplified what Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, you know, and the Battle of Siffin, there came a moment where he's fighting, and the enemy thought it was Imam Ali alayhi salam. And Amir al-Mu'mineen introduces him for the first time, removes the veil, and he says, Hada qamru Bani Hashim. This is the moon of Banu Hashim. Who's Bab al-Hawaij, by the way. Why Allah made him Babul Hawaij, Allah knows. But they say he had two wishes. One wish was to fight on the day of Ashura, and one wish was just to get water to the tents of Sakinah. This Abbas, who's Abbas? Words, he transcends words. The poet says, Chunli khayal ne jo azal mein Ali ki ain, be-bizat-e Rasool ki ismat ka zayb o zain, alhamd ke alif ka sarapa dilon ka chain, wannas ki ye seen ye nutqe dile Husain. हर हर्फ कायनात का अक्कास बन गया, हर हर्फ कायनात का अक्कास बन गया, देखा जो गौर करके तो अब्बास बन गया. हर हर्फ कायनात का. The poet is spelling what made Abbas. Abbas is a conglomerate, he's a making of the likes of Ali and Abbas, and he spells it out, and when it comes together it's Abbas. And the poet says, Babul Hawaij, why? Allah knows. But eventually Abbas says, well, what does the poet says about the maqam? And by the way, I've seen this, you must know. People in the worldly domain, other way. I know people, they were flat, totally like bankrupt. And they did istijabat, istighasa through Imam Hussein, through Hazrat Abbas. They're set for generations. Who they choose to give to, it's up to them. Allah has given their amr. It's a conversation for another day. सखी हुसैन के अब्बास का है ये रोजा, सखी हुसैन के अब्बास का है ये रोजा, मांगने आते हैं इस जगह साया, यही चमकता है आकर हर एक आईना, और दयारे बाबुल हवाइज है फैज का चश्मा. बड़े बड़ों का मुकद्दर सवरते देखा है, बड़े बड़ों का मुकद्दर सवरते देखा है, और समंदरों को यहाँ मश्क भरते देखा है. बड़े बड़ों का मुकद्दर सवरते देखा. The poet saying that I saw the lives and the fate of big people being handled here. I saw oceans filling mushks here, oceans of Abbas and oceans beyond. Who can fathom the maqam of this individual? But it was the blood of Abbas, it was the blood of Ali running through that vein, it was the blood of that likes. In the same way, the father, we don't value sometimes what a father gives up his entire aspirations for their children, their dreams, what they wanted, they give up in a moment. And that connection of Hussein to Ali cannot ever be forgotten. Ruhe azan hai baap, and I'm just concluding. Ruhe azan hai baap to beta namaz-e-deen. Masjid Ali ki hai to musalla Hussein ka. Masjid Ali ki hai तो मुसल्ला हुसैन का. और जागीर किबरिया हुई तकसीम इस तरह, जागीर किबरिया हुई तकसीम इस तरह, काबा अली का अर्श मुअल्ला हुसैन का. काबा काबा अली का अर्श मुअल्ला हुसैन का. That Allah gave his house for Ali to be born into, and Arsh Karbala is mu'alla, and the Arsh of Allah is mu'alla. What that means, Allah. Just understand that there was something about these personalities that God wanted us to follow, these great personalities. Nonetheless, what can I tell you? We take our hearts and our minds to the tragedies of the Ahlul Bayt. Ummul Baneen, when it came to Abbas, she had a tremendous love of Abbas, of course, and all of her sons, right? She had 4 sons she gave in Karbala. And she teaches us sacrifice, Wafa, loyalty. She teaches us immense attributes and immense traits. But there's a moment in time that the narrations say that the news came to Medina of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You know, this is not to be taken lightly. This azah is a gift from Allah to us. I don't say that slightly. You know, they asked, to understand this importance, they asked Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, how do you get inspiration? He says, Urdu poetry. Urdu poetry, really? You're running a $1 trillion company, you're reading Urdu poetry to get inspiration? He said, yeah. He said, in particular, one poet, Ghalib. He said, Ghalib? He said, yes. He said, I read a line from him every day. Its interpretation changes for me every day. This same Ghalib writes a salam for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he says, Salam use ke agar badshah kahe usko. You know, at Columbia, they study Ghalib intently. Salam use ke agar badshah kahe usko.
तो फिर कहें कुछ इससे सिवा कहें उसको। ना बादशाह न सुल्तान ये क्या सताइश है, ना बादशाह न सुल्तान ये क्या सताइश है, कहो कि खाम से आले अबा कहें उसको। He says that he's not a Badshah, he's not a Sultan. What is praise for Hussein? He said perhaps you need to call him the fifth of the Ahlul Kisa, the Panjatan. That's perhaps justice. कहो कि खाम से आले अबा कहें उसको, और हमारे दर्द की यारब कहीं दवा न मिले, हमारे दर्द की यारब कहीं दवा न मिले, अगर न दर्द की अपने दवा कहें उसको। He says, our pain has no remedy unless we call that zikr, the zikr of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, that remedy of our pain. By the way, if you know Ghalib's life, he lost 5 children at least in stillbirth. He had a tough life. And if he's saying that, there's something to think about. Why I'm saying this is, don't take this azah for granted. Having said that, Baneen is in Medina, and there's a moment where the news comes. And when the news comes, eventually, Bishop, he comes and he gives the news, or the Wali of Medina, and he says that قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَةٍ عَلَى قَدْ ذُبِحَتْ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَةٍ. And when that is called out, they say, the people gather, and they say, what did you say? Hussein's been killed in the land of Karbala. At that junction, they say there was a lady who pierced through the crowd. And as she was piercing through the crowd, she got to the horseman, and the man who was riding the horse, and she said, what did you say? What did you just announce? And at that junction, he says that he looked at the lady, and he said something when he recognized her, and he said, may Allah give you a reward for your son that likes of Abbas. Eventually he says, I didn't ask you. She says, I didn't ask you about Abbas. He goes through, in fact, all 4 of the sons. And eventually she says, I didn't ask you about any of them. I didn't ask you about Abdullah. I didn't ask you about Abbas. I didn't ask you about them. Tell me about Hussein. He says, very well, Ummul, Baneen, that Hussein was killed on the lands of Karbala, in the plains of Karbala. She began to cry and say, Wa Husseina. She began to mourn up until the moment in time where they say eventually she went to the cemetery of Baqi, to Jannatul Baqi. And when she went to Jannatul Baqi, do you know what the narrations say? That when she went to Jannatul Baqi, she would recite a Marsiya. Bibi Ummul Baneen was a wonderful poet, an amazing poet, along with being very brave, with all of those things she had. But even the likes of Marwan, when he's escaping, he says, who is this lady who was reciting Marsiya in the cemetery of Baqi, and it's ripping my heart? Someone who had no heart, he's saying that it's ripping my heart. At that junction, they say it is Ummul Baneen, the mother of Abbas, who is remembering her sons. How did she remember her sons? She would go into the cemetery, and she would make one grave with her finger in the sand, and she would make another one with her finger in the sand. She would make another, and she would make a final one, and then she would make one for all 4 of her sons. Then she would wipe it away, and when she would wipe it away, eventually a moment would come where she would make one grave and one shrine, and she would say, Wa Husayna, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ajrukum ala Allah. This was the sacrifice of Ummul Baneen. Azadaro, Ummul Baneen ne 2 jumle zame tamam. Bibi, Ummul Baneen ne sab kuch diya, magar Bibi ne yahi chaha ki girya agar kiya jaye, to bas Husayn pe girya kiya jaye. Husayn mazloom pe girya kiya jaye. Husayn kaun? Husayn ek baap bhi hai, एक बेटा भी है, एक भाई भी है. हुसैन वही है जो नाना की गोद में पला, जो रसूल खुदा के साथ पला, और वही हुसैन आखिर में एक मरहले इम्तिहान, हुसैन अली अकबर का इम्तिहान दे रहे हैं, अब्बास का इम्तिहान दे रहे हैं. एक मंजर ये आता है, उलमा बयान करते हैं कि, और ये सवाल कायम करते हैं और पूछते हैं कि रोज़े आशूरा सबसे प्यासा कौन था? रोज़े आशूरा प्यास की शिद्दत किसके पास सबसे ज्यादा थी? कुछ लोग कहते हैं शायद अली अकबर हो, शायद बीबी सकीना हो, शायद अब्बास हो. उलमा कहते हैं कि जो रोज़े आशूरा जो सबसे प्यासे थे वो इमाम हुसैन थे. खुद इमाम हुसैन सबसे प्यासे थे. दलील क्या? दलील खुद उनकी औलाद है. उलमा कहते हैं कि 3 मराहल ये बयान करते हैं और समझ سمجھتے ہیں کہ ان کی وجہ سے امام حسین سب سے پیاسے تھے؟ پہلا ایک مرحلہ یہ آیا کہ جب ذوالجنا نے یہ دیکھا کہ امام حسین شہید ہو چکے ہیں، اس نے اپنے آپ پر خون حسین ملا، اور جب خون حسین اپنے آپ پر ذوالجنا نے ملا تو واپس خیمہ گاہ کی جانب آیا۔ جب خیمہ گاہ کی جانب آیا تو پھر کہاں پہنچا؟ ذوالجنا ایک 4 سالہ معصوم سکینہ کے پاس پہنچا، اور پھر بی بی نے خون آلود ذوالجنا دیکھا، اور بی بی نے ایک سوال کیا، کہا ذوالجنا میں سمجھ گئی، ذوالجنا میں سمجھ گئی بابا شہید ہو گئے، بابا قتل کر دیے گئے، یہ لہو بتا رہا ہے، مگر ذوالجنا میرا ایک سوال ہے۔ ذوالجنا سے سوال کیا تھا سکینہ کا؟ سکینہ نے کہا ہے ذوالجنا بابا شہید ہو گئے، مگر اتنا جواب دے دے اس سوال کا، حل سقیا ابی ام قتل افشانا، کیا میرے بابا کو پانی ملا یا پیاسا گنا کر دیا؟ کیا میرے بابا کو پانی ملا یا پیاسا گنا کر دیا گیا؟ 3 دن سے حسین غریب کو پانی نہ ملا، یہ پہلی دلیل۔ دوسری دلیل علماء قائم کرتے ہیں کہ ایک منظر یہ آیا کہ جب خدا کسی باپ کو یہ منظر نہ دکھائے، جب کبھی جوان علی اکبر مقبل سے واپس آئے، کہا بابا میں اشقیاء کو بتا دیتا کہ میں کس کا لا دلا ہوں، مگر ایک گھونٹ پانی کا مل جاتا میں ان کو بتا دیتا کہ میرے رگوں میں کس کا خون بہ رہا ہے۔ اس وقت امام کے پاس پانی نہیں تھا، امام نے اپنی انگوٹھی لی اور کہا علی اکبر تمہارے رسول خدا تمہیں سیراب کرے کوثر سے، علی مرتضیٰ تمہیں سیراب کرے۔ اس مرحلے پر امام نے چاہا کہ علی اکبر سمجھ جائے کہ امام بھی اسی شدت میں ہے، کہا علی اکبر اپنا دہن میرے دہن میں ڈال دو، اپنا دور۔ امام نے یہ کہا، علی اکبر نے کہا بابا آپ تو مجھ سے بھی پیاسے ہیں، بابا آپ کے منہ میں تو ایسے لگ رہا ہے کانٹے ہیں، بابا اجرکم علی اللہ۔ یہ دوسرا آخری مرحلہ ہے۔ تیسرا دلیل جو علماء قائم کرتے ہیں، کہتے ہیں کہ بعد از کربلا جب شہادت ہو چکی، ایک منظر یہ آیا کہ امام سجاد نے جب 3 دن بعد معجزاً امام آئے اور انہوں نے دفن کیا، اور جب انہوں نے دفن کیا امام حسین کو، انہوں نے چاہا کہ کچھ لکھا جائے امام حسین کے قبر اقدس پر۔ جب آپ کو ہم اپنے اعزاء اقارب کو دفن کرتے ہیں تو پھر ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ہم وہ لکھیں جو ہمارے دل پہ گزر رہی ہے، کتنا چاہنے والا باپ تھا، کتنا اچھا انسان تھا، کتنا نیک انسان تھا، جو بھی دل پہ گزر رہی ہے وہی لکھا جاتا ہے۔ کہتے ہیں امام سجاد کے دل پہ کیا گزر رہی تھی، ایک ہی جملہ کہا اور لکھا کہ ہذا قبر الحسین الذی قتلوه افشانا، یہ حسین غریب کی قبر ہے جسے پیاسا شہید کر دیا گیا۔ امام سجاد کے دل پہ کیا گزر گئی، آخری جملہ کیا گزری امام سجاد کے دل پہ، عزادارو پتہ نہیں زندگی رہے نہ رہے، پتہ نہیں ملاقات رہے نہ رہے، یہی آخری زحمت میں نے ختم کیا۔ کہتے ہیں کہ جب جابر بن عبداللہ الانصاری اور امام سجاد نے ملاقات کی چہروں پر 40 پر قبر امام حسین کے پاس، تو ایک مرحلہ یہ آیا کہ امام سجاد نے کہا جابر کیا سننا چاہتے ہو کہ روز عاشور ہمارے ساتھ کیا ہوا، شام غریبان ہمارے ساتھ کیا ہوا؟ کہا اے رسول اللہ بتائیے۔ امام نے کہا پہلا چاہنے والا تھا، بڑے دن بعد ملا تھا، کہا اے جابر جب عاشورہ ہو گئی، پھر شام غریبہ ڈھلی، جب رات آئی تو پھر اشقیاء نے کہا کہ ان لاشوں پر
گھوڑے دوڑا دیے جائیں، گھوڑے دوڑا دیے جائیں۔ اے جابر، پھر لوگوں نے کہا یہ ہمارے قبیلے کے ہیں، یہ ہمارے قبائلی تعلق ہیں، ان سے ہم اجازت نہیں دیں گے۔ یکی بدی ایک کے بعد ایک لوگ اپنے اعزاء قارب اور قبیلے والوں کو، ان کے لاشوں کو ہٹاتے گئے۔ اے جابر، بس فاطمہ کا لادلا، علی کا لادلا، حسین میرا بابا ریت کربلا میں تھا، گھوڑوں کی ٹانگوں کے نیچے ڈال دیا گیا۔ اے جابر، میں بیٹا سنتا رہا، میرا باپ کی ہڈی دی گئی۔
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Ya Allah, accept this ibadah. Ya Allah, allow us to learn and respect and have reverence for our parents. And Ya Allah, allow us to learn from the teachings of Karbala so that we can build role models for the future and hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Final request, if you could please recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for Marhum Abdulhussein Shani Jaffer and Marhumin of the Jaffer family, Marhumin of the Habib family, the Dewji family, Ghulam Ali Dewji, Safdar Jaffer, Shabir Nathani, Sajjad Jaffer, Mahmoud Datu, Rasa, Huda, Askar Farhad, Hassan Ali, Marhumin of the Ganji family, and Kul Marhumin Mu'minat, and for your Marhumin, and for our Marhumin, for all those who do not have someone to recite a Fatiha for them in this night, Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat.
یا حسین
کیسے پڑے ہیں جسم کے ٹکڑے جدا جدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پتھر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ آہستہ سے جواب دو، ہے ساتھ اس کی ماں، کیا اب تمہارے پاس ہے معصوم بے زبان؟ ننھا سا لاش کس گئے سینے پہ رکھا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پتھر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب
زینب نے دی صدا کیا تم میرے حسین ہو عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے جب شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ یہ رو دلہا لیے پہرے پہ ستمگار کھڑا ہے دلہا لیے پہرے پہ ستمگار کھڑا ہے کیسے تیرے لاشے پہ سکینہ تجھے روئے کیسے تیرے لاشے پہ سکینہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے عباس ماشاءاللہ تجھے روئے جس وقت اٹھایا نہ گیا لاشا جواں کا جس وقت اٹھایا نہ گیا لاشا جواں کا شے اس گھڑی اکبر سے زیادہ تجھے روئے شے اس گھڑی اکبر سے زیادہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے عباس تجھے روئے زینب نے کہا شام غریباں میں وادی زینب نے کہا شام غریباں میں غادی بے پردہ مجھے دیکھ کے بابا تجھے روئے بے پردہ مجھے دیکھ کے بابا تجھے روئے عباس تیرا ماشاءاللہ تجھے جب شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے عباس تیرا تجھے روئے عباس تجھے روئے سجدے کے لیے جب لیا ہاتھوں کا سہارا سجدے کے لیے جب لیا ہاتھوں کا سہارا سجاد مصلی پہ ہمیشہ تجھے روئے سجاد مصلی پہ ہمیشہ تجھے روئے عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ این 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 الحسین اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین این 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 الحسین اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین این 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 ماشاءاللہ مظلوم حسین اے جان میرے بتاؤ کہاں جنت سے آئی ہوں سن لو فغاں سارا کی کربل میں نوحہ کنا شدت سے کرتی تھی غم کو بیاں ماں کو دکھا دے تو چہرہ حسین اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین اینا اینا مظلوم حسین اینا 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 الحسین مظلوم حسین سوچا نہ تھا ایسا ہوگا کبھی بے مقنا رہ جائے زینب میری کس جرم کی یہ سزا مل گئی قیدی بنے آج بنت علی دشمن نہ سمجھے گا رتبہ حسین اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین اینا 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 اے جان زہرا حسین قاسم نہیں میرا اکبر نہیں اولو محمد وہ اصغر نہیں لاتے وہ بکھری مگر سر نہیں سر پر سکینہ کے چادر نہیں ہاں لٹ گیا تیرا کنبہ حسین اے جان مظلوم حسین اینا 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 مظلوم حسین اینا 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 مظلوم آخر میں یہ استغاثی کلام آپ میں پیش کر رہا ہوں اور جناب اکبر رضوی کو بھی ہم یاد کرتے ہیں ان کو شفاء کاملہ نصیب ہو یہ استغاثہ پیش کر رہا ہوں جو کربلا گئے ہیں وہ اس مناجات کی کیفیت کو محسوس کریں گے جو اب تک نہیں گئے ہیں اس مناجات کے صدقے اس مجلس کے صدقے کہ ان تمام مومنین کو اور مومنات کو زیارت با عبداللہ حسین نصیب ہو پیش کر رہا ہوں میں کرب بلا میں کرب بلا چوموں گا غرام سے ہو جائے نگاہوں کو دیدار علم پہ سے بس لطف کرم مجھ پر سرکار یہی کرنا جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ بلا لینا ماشاءاللہ بعض بلند جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ مولا میری حاجت کو للہ روا کرنا جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ اے دل تجھے محشر سے ڈرنے کی ضرورت کیا تو کر دو بلا پہنچا جنت کی ضرورت کیا ہو میرے مقدر میں کربل سے جڑے رہنا جب دل میرا گھبرائے اس درد کے مارے کو لمحہ مجھے خود سے مولا نہ جدا کرنا، جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ بلا لینا، مولا میری حاجت کو للہ روا کرنا، جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ۔ آخر شعر پیش کر رہا ہوں، محسوس کیجئے گا۔ میں کیسے پلٹ جاؤں جنت کی فضاؤں سے، میں دور کروں کیسے روضے کو نگاہوں سے، مشکل ہے بہت مولا اس در سے پلٹ جانا، جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ مولا، مولا میری حاجت کو للہ روا کرنا، جب دل میرا گھبرائے روضے پہ۔ اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد، اللہم کن لولیک الحجۃ بن الحسن صلواتک علیہ۔ ماشاءاللہ، بہت بلند۔ فی هذه الساعة وفي كل وليا وحافظا وقائدا وذليلا وأيضا حتى تسكنه وتمتعهم فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين۔
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ محمد المصطفیٰ خاتم النبیین، السلام علیکم یا ولی اللہ علی المرتضی امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا خدیجۃ الکبریٰ ام المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا صدیقۃ الطاہرہ فاطمۃ الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، السلام علیکم یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علیکم یا ابا عبد اللہ، وعلى الارواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله ابدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن وعلى أولاد وعلى أصحاب وأخيك يا أبا الفضل العباس، أختك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة ورقية جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي علم النبيين وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر القائم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغربى ومعين الضعفاء والفقراء سلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الذكي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النكي الهادي والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان سيدي الأمان 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 فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن وشريك القرآن وكعبة